Today's episode of Just the Tip Tuesday is brought to you by CK Worldwide, the standard in TIG welding. Right now, CK is running an awesome deal on their MT200 AC/DC TIG welder now through the end of 2022. The MT200 comes with everything you need right out of the box to start TIG welding, except the consumables and gas. The MT200 is a complete TIG welding system capable of 5 amp arc starts and has a compact portable design, weighing in at just 32 pounds, and it's dual voltage, so you can run it off 115 or 220 volt. And it boasts an easy-to-use interface to allow you to get set up to weld in a flash. The MT200 AC/DC is the answer to both creativity and production-driven TIG welding. This innovative TIG machine provides the ability to quickly and efficiently adapt to dynamic welding situations while maintaining the quality of experience you've come to know, love, and expect from CK Worldwide. Get your MT200 today for just $19.95, along with other genuine CK Worldwide parts and accessories through your local authorized CK distributor. Not sure where your closest distributor is? No problem. Head on over to ckworldwide.com and click on the Find a Dealer tab. It's that easy. CK Worldwide, the standard in TIG welding. Now let's get into the episode. Welcome to this week's episode of Just the Tip Tuesday, everyone. Today's question was submitted via Instagram by Joel Rigsby. Joel asked if I could cover WPSs, what they are, how they work, what do they include, why do we need them, and why are they important? He'd also like to know how someone writes them. I'd like to start off with, what is a WPS? The American Welding Society loves abbreviations, so let's start off first by explaining the abbreviation. WPS stands for Welding Procedure Specification. A welding procedure specification is essentially a list of instructions that all welders should be able to read and follow. It also allows us to make repeatable welds with repeatable results. It's the opposite of how most job shops and fab shops actually operate. Most of us, including myself, throughout much of my time in the shop and field, weld off experience. For the most part, I know where to set my settings based off the material thickness, the material type, the process I'm going to be running, etc. Some people just rely on the old paint marker or the Sharpie line on the knob to get dialed in. At the end of the day, that really leaves a lot of chance for things to go wrong since all welders are not equal when it comes to skill and experience. But with a WPS, it eliminates a lot of the guesswork for us. A typical WPS is going to list out everything we as welders need to know to make repeatable welds with repeatable results. Think of it like a recipe. Let's say I'm a baker and my specialty is chocolate chip cookies. I make some badass chocolate chip cookies. I've been making these things for years, and my business is doing pretty good, and I'm deciding that I'm going to go ahead and expand a little bit, and I need to hire some more bakers to bake these cookies. So I go out and I hire 10 bakers. Now, obviously, if they all applied, they consider themselves bakers. And a baker should be able to make a chocolate chip cookie, right? I mean, you would think if you call yourself a baker, you should be able to make a chocolate chip cookie. Well, that's not always the case. So I'm going to give them the same recipe, because in my recipe, I might use 4 eggs for my cookies. And some of the new guys, they might think, hey, I only need to use 3 of these eggs. And the other bakers, they might not even know that we need eggs at all. You see where I'm going with this? We all need to be on the same page to produce these cookies correctly. Because at the end of the day, I don't want bland, hard chocolate chip cookies. No, I want tasty and soft chocolate chip cookies. So we're going to make them the same way that's on the recipe, so we all make the same damn cookies and we have repeatable results. Before we get into the nitty-gritty of the WPS, I want to point out that we have a couple different ways that we can actually produce them. In some codes, we have what's called a pre-qualified WPS, and the rest of these we have to qualify by testing. Let's first discuss the pre-qualified WPSs. In D11, as well as some of the other codes we have a list of specific welding processes, base metal combinations, along with filler metal combinations and joint designs that we can use to write up a pre-qualified welding procedure specification without having to go through the trouble of doing all the testing for all these different combinations of filler metals and base metals and welding processes, because the work's already done for us. And that's why they're considered pre-qualified. But let's say we want to weld with a process or a base metal combination or filler metal type or a joint design or anything else that's not been pre-qualified. We're going to need to go through the prescribed testing based off the code we're working on. This process can cost quite a bit of money. I'm talking up to and sometimes in excess of $10,000 to test a single procedure. Really depends on what we're doing. $10,000, that's roughly what it can cost to do this type of testing. Different codes, they're going to require different testing, and that's really too much to get into in a short podcast. But just to give you an overview of some of the testing that's involved, we'd first have to do some VT, or visual testing, to make sure that the weld is free from cracks and that meets all the visual acceptance criteria to the given code we're working with. If it passes visual, we may need to take the next step and do some RT, or radiographic testing, also known as X-ray. Once it passes that, then we might have to cut it up and process the different weld specimens, and we might have to do some macro etches where, we polish everything up and then we put some acid on there to expose the root, the depth of penetration, sidewall fusion, the heat effective zone, all that good stuff. Once that's done, might need to do some Sharpie V-notch testing and a couple of root and face bends and maybe some tensile pulls. There's a lot of testing that goes into this stuff. And guess what? Let's say at the end of this testing, the procedure we developed fails. We didn't meet the criteria. Guess what? We have to start all over again. And that's going to cost even more money. But if it passes, all that information gets recorded on another sheet called a PQR, or Procedure Qualification Record. All WPSs that are not pre-qualified should have a PQR attached to it. The PQR is a record of all the conditions and parameters and settings and everything that took place while we made that weld that got qualified, along with the data from the various testing and results. It seems a bit excessive, but this stuff is important. How else are we going to know if these welds are going to perform and last once they're put into service? Seriously, how do you know that the trailer going down the road isn't going to fall apart while it's being towed at 80 miles an hour on a highway with a 4-ton load on it? We don't unless we do some testing, or we have some WPSs that have been qualified by testing, proving that it actually works. That's why most large-scale companies who really care about the products that they're putting out and putting into service, they have WPSs, and they're using welders that are certified to these procedures. I welded for a long time before I learned about WPSs, and now I wish that everyone used them for every critical part that gets welded. Because think about it. Do you want to drive down the road in a vehicle where there hasn't been any testing or procedures put in place for how that car or truck was welded together? What about the bridge you have to drive across to get to work? Or maybe the building that you work in on the 3rd floor? Or that roller coaster you're going to ride this summer while you're on vacation? You definitely want this stuff tested. And you want to know that the people welding on those items are capable enough and competent enough to do the work. I know I do. So that's kind of the why we need WPSs. We need them to make repeatable welds with repeatable results. We need to know at the end of the day, this stuff is going to work. So what all goes into a weld procedure specification? Well, there's a lot. And included in the show notes of this episode, I'll go ahead and put a link where you can find a blank copy of a WPS and you can see firsthand what all goes into it. There's actually 21 items that are considered essential variables on a pre-qualified WPS, according to Table 5.2 in the 2020 edition of the D11 Codebook. Essential means that's what has to be used or done. If we deviate from that, we need to write a whole new procedure. Now, we do have some tolerances on some of these variables, and once again, if we go outside of these variables, we need to write a whole new procedure. Let's go ahead and rip through some of these essential variables. Number 1, welding processes. 2, welding positions. 3, base metal group. That's in another table inside the codebook. Base metal preheat category. That's also another table we have to refer to. Filler metal classifications. Filler metal and flux classifications for submerged arc welding. Nominal electrode diameter. How big is the diameter of the electrode we're going to use? Number 8, number of electrodes. This only applies to submerged arc welding. Electrode spacing and orientation. Once again, submerged arc. What type of amperage are we going to use? Number 11, voltage. Number 12, mode of metal transfer. We doing short circuit, globular, spray? What transfer mode we using? Number 13, type of current. We using AC or DC here. Number 14, current polarity. We use an AC or DC electrode negative or DC electrode positive. Number 15, wire feed speed if we're using anything related to wire, such as flux core or gas metal arc welding. Number 16, travel speed. That's a huge variable because if we're traveling too slow, we're putting a lot more heat into that part. Number 17, nominal shielding gas for flux core arc welding, gas shielded, and gas metal arc welding. Number 18, shielding gas flow. What's our flow meter set at for flux core, gas shielded, and gas metal arc welding? Number 19, weld type. We putting a fillet weld in here, complete joint penetration, partial joint penetration, plug weld, slot weld. Number 20, groove weld details. How are we going to prep this thing to weld it up? Number 21, post-weld heat treatment. You see, there's a lot of stuff that actually goes into this, but that's our recipe, and those are our ingredients. And if we follow the recipe and we use the right ingredients, we can make the best damn cookies every time we go to bake. Again, it's repeatable. So if someone has the skill set and I give them a welding procedure specification, they should get repeatable results every time they drop the hood. There's no guesswork. We're not relying on the settings that you like to weld with. We're using what we know works, and we know this works because we have the data to prove it, because we've done the testing and we've done our due diligence. And to answer the last question, how does somebody write them? That's a tough one. There's a lot of speculation on who can write a WPS and who should write one. In my opinion, the person writing it should have a good understanding of what's actually required. Not all CWIs are going to understand how to write a procedure. Not all engineers are going to understand how to write them either. I highly recommend anybody that wants to write a welding procedure specification, go take some classes. I also recommend going ahead and getting your CWI because you're going to talk a lot about it in the CWI seminar. Although it's not a requirement, it will help you have a better understanding of how to do it correctly. The person that understands how to write them and what's required should be the only person writing them. Well, Joel, I hope that answers your question, and I hope everyone listening has a better understanding as to how and why we write, test, and use WPSs. As always, if you guys have any questions you want answered or a topic you want covered, you can shoot me an email, show@arcjunkies.com. You can hit me up on Instagram @ArcJunkiesPodcast, or simply hit the send us a message tab at the bottom of the Arc Junkies website, arcjunkies.com. If I choose your question, I'll give you a shout out on the show and send you a free Arc Junkies sticker pack. Hope you all have a great, safe, productive week out there. And until next time, make every weld better than your last.